the 2-year floating rate note that Treasury Direct is auctioning off this week. What are floating rate notes? Why do we prefer T-bill ladders over floating rate notes? And who might consider buying the 2-year floating rate note at this week's auction? Hello, members and super savers. I hope you're healthy and well. These are the 3 questions I'll be answering in today's video. Because, well, again, quite a few of you have been asking me to cover the topic of floating rate notes for quite some time now. So let's get to it today. As usual, here's our front of video disclaimer. For a detailed disclaimer, please refer to the end of this video. Floating rate notes, also abbreviated as FRNs, are fixed income securities that pay a coupon which is not fixed, but is changing over time, floating so to speak. This floating changing coupon is in principle determined by a reference rate that resets over a specific period of time, say every 13 weeks. FRNs are usually most beneficial in a rising interest rate environment, like the one we've been in currently, because they allow an investor to earn more as interest rates go up over time. However, at the same time, this means that FRNs aren't great in a falling interest rate environment because an investor will earn less as interest rates go down. Floating rate notes are issued by financial institutions, non-financial companies, as well as by the US government. This video will focus on the floating rate notes issued by our government because I know some of you are contemplating Treasury Direct's auction of this floating rate note on Wednesday. Treasury Direct started issuing FRNs in 2014. These US Treasury FRNs are 2-year notes that pay interest 4 times a year, or in other words, every 3 months until maturity. Federal taxes are due each year on FRN interest earned, and FRNs are exempt from state and or local taxes like T-bills. Here's when FRN auctions occur over the course of the year. New issue auctions take place in January, April, July, and October. Reopening auctions happen the other 8 months of the year. As a reminder, a reopening auction is when Treasury Direct sells additional amounts of a previously issued security. The reopened security has the same CUSIP number, maturity date, and interest rate or spread as the original security, but it has a different issue date and usually a different price when it's sold. So, as an example, at the FRN reopening auction in August, next month, Treasury Direct will be selling the same FRN that is being auctioned off as a new issue later this week in July. The FRN in the August reopening auction, it will have the same CUSIP, the same maturity date, and the same spread as the new issue that is being auctioned off later this week in July. More on the spread later. But because it'll be a month later, the FRN that's being auctioned off in August will have a different issue date and most likely a different price than the new issue one here based on whatever the prevailing market conditions and expectations will be next month versus this month. So, the spread. As I mentioned earlier, the coupon, the rate on floating rate notes, well, it's floating, not fixed, like it would be on a normal 2-year Treasury note. Per Treasury Direct, the interest rate of an FRN is a sum of 2 components, an index rate and a spread. The index rate is tied to the highest accepted discount rate of the most recent 13-week T-bill, which for all practical purposes means that the index rate of an FRN will track close to the interest rate of the respective latest 13-week T-bill. Treasury Direct auctions off the 13-week T-bill every week, so the index rate of an FRN is reset every week. So, the spread is a rate that is added to the index rate. The spread stays the same for the life of an FRN and is determined at the auction when the FRN is first offered. So the new issue auctions that happen in January, April, July, and October. The index rate, this component here, and the spread, this component here, added together equal the interest rate. And if we scroll up, we can see that the spread on the latest 2-year FRN that was auctioned off is 0.169%. This 0.169% spread plus the index rate based on this latest 13-week auction result is the interest rate that an investor holding this FRN CUSIP would get for 7 days. And when this next 13-week T-bill auction happens this week, if the auction result is different from the previous weeks, then the index rate on this FRN CUSIP will also change, meaning that the interest rate on the FRN for the following next 7 days will also be different than it is now, and so on with every weekly auction of the 13-week T-bill. And as I said before, that's why this is referred to as a floating rate note. As a reminder, the FRN that's being auctioned off this week by Treasury Direct is a new issue, meaning that a new FRN spread will most likely be set based on current market conditions and expectations. So this spread number here will more likely than not change after this week's FRN new issue auction takes place, and then stay the same for the August and September FRN reopening auctions. Because remember, the spread is set at the new issue auction only. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, why ladder 13-week T-bills when we could have benefited from rising interest rates by buying 2-year FRNs that pay a spread above the 13-week T-bill? Great question, and a great segue into the next video section. There are two main reasons we prefer T-bill ladders over floating rate notes. One, the spread on FRNs is not always positive. In fact, it was actually negative for most of last year, as you can see here from last year's FRN auction results. And a negative spread means that it's deducted from the base index rate, which in turn means you could earn less on an FRN than on the 13-week T-bill. Not an attractive proposition in my mind. The spreads only started turning positive around this time last year, and this almost 4 measly basis points were not enough to win me over to the FRN side because, two, FRNs are pretty illiquid. A particularly important point because I know quite a few of the members and super savers in our community hold T-bills, which are basically considered to be the most liquid investment in the world. So, I'd like to point you to this here. You can hold an FRN until it matures, or sell it before it matures. Well, I can tell you that if you had bought this FRN in April, May, or June at auction, you'd have a tough time selling it. At the time of this taping, you can't sell it on Schwab Online. You can't sell it on Vanguard Online either. And if you're wondering, these buy-sell buttons are grayed out. Nothing happened when we tried clicking on them. The CUSIP doesn't even show up on E-Trade. And while Fidelity offers a trade via a third party and via a third party only, the lack of liquidity is pretty clear here. We looked at some of these FRNs that were auctioned off last year and were able to find some that were tradable on Fidelity and Vanguard Online, but the minimum order requirements were $50,000 or more. Compare that to a T-bill ladder that can be customized to mature when you want it to and in the amounts that you want it to. And in the worst case scenario, even if you have to sell, there is usually a market for it. So, in our minds, even with positive spreads now, this lack of liquidity when it comes to FRNs is not worth the additional 10 or even 20 basis point spread, especially given the fact that we feel there may be other investment opportunities with higher returns out there if that's what you're looking for, both within the fixed income world and outside of the fixed income world. Having said that, everyone's financial journey is different. So let's talk briefly about who might consider buying the 2-year floating rate note at this week's auction. So, in my view, for the average retail investor, buying at this week's 2-year floating rate note auction makes sense if you believe 3 things. 1, the spread will continue to be in positive territory. And remember, you won't know for sure what the spread will be until after the upcoming new issue auction. 2, you believe rates will keep going up for the better part of the next 2 years. And 3, you plan on holding to maturity. If you believe all 3 of these things, then I could see a case for buying at this week's 2-year floating rate note auction. And if this is you, there are 3 places that are offering this FRN at auction. It's showing up on Schwab's Treasury auction page, as well as on E-Trade's Treasury auction page here. And also on Treasury Direct. This is the one that will be auctioned off this week, And here's the one that will be auctioned off in August's reopening auction. The minimum purchase requirement in this instance is $1,000 with Schwab and E-Trade, and the minimum purchase requirement is $100 with Treasury Direct. And you would go through the same steps as outlined in these T-bill videos linked below to locate and purchase the FRN. Vanguard and Fidelity do not appear to offer FRNs at auction. So, are floating rate notes as attractive as you thought? Are they or will they be a part of your financial journey? Drop us a comment below and let me and the other members and Super Savers know. Now, in case they're not, and you're ready to venture a bit beyond T-bills, then check out these latest agency bond videos here to see if agency bonds might be a better fit. Quite a few of the longer dated new issue agency bonds we've come across recently are yielding 6% plus. Plus, I'd love to invite you to continue to support our channel through membership so that we can keep producing one-of-a-kind, unbiased, sponsorship-free videos for a super saving community. And get your questions answered in our next live member Q&A on August 25th at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And check out our latest member videos. To learn more about Diamond Nest Egg membership, visit our channel page or the join link in the video description below for more details. All right, members and super savers, as always, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. And if you did, don't forget to share with those you care about and to hit that thumbs up. And see you again very soon with more brand new wealth building content for your financial journey.